I don't see it on there. Where's the live button on YouTube? Under...
It's not. Don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I don't see it on Facebook either. Weird.
Corey, you're live on YouTube.
I'm not seeing it though. Are you sure it's on FLG? Which
Yep.
which account are you looking at? Because I'm on FLG Lacrosse and I don't see it.
I'm on FLG.
I don't see it though. Why am I not seeing it? Is it live on Facebook too? Because I don't see it on Facebook either.
You're live on YouTube, so I get going.
Yeah, but Cliff, I don't see it. How come I'm not seeing
I
it?
do, and it's on FLG Lacrosse.
Mike, do you see it on YouTube?
I mean, it doesn't show up for me.
Mike doesn't see it either, Cliff.
Corey, you're on.
All right. So I guess we will get rolling then. Do you want to roll the intro here, Cliff, so that way we'll start it officially?
Sure, and then I'm going to work on Facebook.
All right, sounds good. All right, how you doing, guys? We are live on our next episode of Beyond the Game. Our special guest today is Mike Loveday of laxrecords.com. We're really excited to have Mike on. Mike, how you doing out west right now, and how you guys holding up over there?
I'm doing good, Corey. Thanks for having me on. Me and the family we're holding it down. We're stay-at-home orders, and we're trying to follow the rules, but we're healthy, so we're happy.
Good, man. I'm glad you guys are healthy and happy. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about your personal journey of when you were kind of first introduced to lacrosse and how that passion for the sport has evolved into creating something really special that you can call your own, which is laxrecords.com.
Yeah, it's a kind of a funny story. I always thought it was funny because I grew up in North Carolina, like that's where I basically spent the first practically 18 years of my life, and then I moved to Maryland, graduated from Mount St. Mary's, where I was the sports editor, which was kind of my first introduction to lacrosse at all. Like I covered a couple games of lacrosse my final semester at Mount St. Mary's, and then I took a job in Wilmington, North Carolina, as a stringer for the Wilmington Star News, and I initially ran track and field. And my editor, like I was one of those guys that was young and hungry, and I kept telling my editor, I was like, I can do more, because as a stringer, it was $25 a day I worked, or $25 a story. So it was like, I was willing to do as much as I possibly could. And one day he calls me up at my full-time job, and he's like, I think I got a way that you can quit that place. He was like, our lacrosse guy just quit. He was like, we need someone to cover it because the season started, I think, that week. After a quick discussion with my family, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, well, I get the chance, and I got to tell you, like, and they were like, you're from Maryland, so you know lacrosse, right? And as a young guy, you never, a young reporter, you never say no. So I was like, yeah, sure. And then immediately that night, I'm like, all right, what, I was like, I knew just enough to be, to sound like an idiot to anybody who probably knew about lacrosse. So spent a lot of time Googling, and but I was very lucky because the head coach at Laney, which most people probably know as Michael Jordan's high school, He actually, I called him up because I knew him from, I think he was also worked with like the football team. And he just kind of was like, here's some basic rules and stuff you need to know to get you through the next few weeks. So that was kind of like, I covered that for a few weeks, few months out of the season. And that was kind of the real first introduction I had with the sport and covering it.
Fantastic. And what are some things that you learned kind of quickly covering the sport as you kind of jumped right into it? And what kind of stood out to you and as something that, you today say, hey, I love this part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first one was, I think, from what I hear, it's the same thing with a lot of people. It's the speed and the rate of play. Like I grew up in, like I said, I grew up in North Carolina, so I grew up in ACC country, rooting for NC State Wolfpack, and so it was basketball, and then covering lacrosse. Like I saw a lot of that in lacrosse, and so that was kind of the almost immediate attraction. And then just the contact of the game, and then once I started covering it more regularly when I worked at ESPN when they did their ESPN high school site, it was really the community. I mean, obviously that's really kind of what has kept me in it for this many years is, just there were so many coaches that, I would call them up and be very nervous because I'm like, I really don't know much about this team because I'm kind of figuring it out and really starting out. And, I remember Coach Boardley at Landon, Coach Mercado at St. Paul's, like they were so welcoming and so just kind of like open arms, be like, I wasn't treated as an outsider, looking to cover their sport, which in some sports that I've covered, like you kind of are. And so that was probably for me one of the greatest things about this game is just the community and how everybody just kind of embraces and wants it to grow and wants more people to be involved with it.
And what was the catalyst for you creating Lax Records? And if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the mission of the site and what you do on it.
Yeah, well, the mission is I'm working to kind of basically digitize the history of boys high school lacrosse. And I started it basically because in 2012, we got our whole entire department got laid off from ESPN. We like to joke that they needed the money to buy Lucasfilm because I think about 6 months later is when they bought Star Wars, and basically the rest of my childhood. But we were kind of their first big layoffs when ESPN was doing those layoffs a number of years ago. And then the company that I had been working for that they had purchased was called Student Sports. And so they reformed about a year ago, and I was their lacrosse editor. And I think that's when we first met. I was working at Student Sports and covering events and doing stuff, basically the same stuff I was doing at ESPN. And then, but they were funded by venture capitalists, and they pulled out. So after 2 tries at being an editor and other people, I was unemployed for time in a couple of years, and literally sitting on my couch. I'm like, all right, what do I want? And one to busy because putting out resumes and looking for a job for so long kind of got boring. But I was like, I love lacrosse, and I really kind of hate the fact that other people are really dictating my involvement in it. So I was like, I'm going to start the site because I had literally had a 1-page document of records of like career points and goals and coaching wins and stuff like that. And I was like, let me put it up. And I was like, you know what? I'll give it a year. If it doesn't work, if no one looks at it, then, nothing really lost. But, to my somewhat of a surprise, it's kind of taken off over the last 5 years.
That's awesome. And how do you even go about getting all this information on your site? I'm sure a lot of people are kind of curious just how you man this thing by yourself and do it, in a an accurate way, in a creative way, and also in a way that's easy to kind of digest, because there's definitely a lot of websites, and there's definitely a lot of content out there in and around the sport that's not as easy to find or read about or kind of share.
Yeah. When I started, I struggle to remember how I actually started finding the initial list of records. I think Lax Power probably had a few of them that was kind of the jumping off point, but it all really started when somebody emailed me, and I forget, I can't remember who the parent was, but they were like, oh, my kid just scored, 400 goals. Like that's gotta be, or 400 points. Like that's gotta be a record, right? And I was like, I was like, I don't know. So, and this is when I was at ESPN, and I was like, so I started just kind of doing some research and looking some stuff up, and that was right around the time Justin Anderson was playing at Coronado in Nevada, and he was in process of putting up 600 points. So just kind of got lucky that I was able to find some of that, and it was through really the way the site works still today is through the community. A lot of people, like I email every coaches after every season, ask them for their season updates, any players with career numbers and stuff like that. And I get a lot of information from that. A lot of it is, combing through various websites like news reports and stuff like that to see who's reporting on the game. I got to give a shout out to NJ.com. They do probably the best job of covering lacrosse from anyone I've seen. Newsday is another one. Like I'm on Newsday in the spring pretty religiously and covering those because I know they're accurate and the information is solid because I know all the coaches and stuff report. So, I usually spend time every day combing through those websites to kind of get the game by game. And then the end of season is usually where a lot of coaches. And, one thing I found is if I put out something and I say it's a record, if it's not, people are pretty quick to let me know when I'm wrong. So a lot of times, if I have something and I'm not 100% sure about it, I'll put it out and be like, hey, this is what has been reported and what I know. And then someone will initially email me like, oh, no, this, I know this kid has, this amount of points. But, and I know a lot of people, I think sometimes it can be frustrating for people because they email me and be like, well, I have to verify it. And they're like, well, I just told you, isn't that enough? And I think they feel like I don't trust them. But I'm like, it's like I always have to get it from a head coach, which for some of the records can be challenging because a lot of times, sometimes that coach isn't still there or, records weren't that well. But I always, it's that reporter in me. It's like I always have to get it from two separate places and they have to match up. And I really prefer 3. So sometimes that's kind of the challenge with finding some of this stuff and making sure it's accurate.
Yeah, it definitely keeps the integrity and authenticity of of what you've built, and now you have a great reputation because the information is accurate and it's a great source for the sport. It's something that as we develop our media here on Long Island and continue to promote the sport in different ways, it's huge to have a resource like that because we always are having those same conversations like, hey, who does have the most points in their entire career from Long Island, or who has the most goals, or the streaks. And I think it's really cool. And then the same for you when you create maybe a ranking or a list, or like you said, you post a record. Is it do you tend to a lot of times get feedback from the community, and what are things that you put out there that people tend to really enjoy in your experience?
Honestly, probably the coaching win-loss career wins record list is probably one of the most popular. My New York State page, it's because if I had a screenshot of what the site looked like when I first started, to me, it's almost hilarious to think back now because I didn't have state pages back then. It was just literally a career list of points, goals, assists. But then the more and more, I listen to the people who follow the site and the fans who follow the site. They're like, oh, it'd be really great if you did this. And then it would be up to me because since I'm more of a content guy, so some of the technical stuff is more of a challenge. So trying to figure out how to kind of implement some of that stuff, but that's kind of where the state pages are born. And New York is the most popular state page on the site. And it's just been kind of listening to the community has grown it a lot. And just kind of, so it's, but the state lists are probably the most popular things. And it's, New York's number 1. I think Pennsylvania's 2. Ohio's in the top 3. So sometimes it's funny when I look at the list and I'm like, oh, I probably wouldn't have thought about that. I had my own assumptions because I figured with New York, it's so well covered that I was like, I didn't think anybody would really look at my site for that, but to find that's the most popular. And I was like, well, I guess I am one of the few sites that kind of take records from, upstate and Long Island and, central New York and kind of put them in one place. So you can see what where a Nick Galasso versus a Jordan Evans, how those two compared in their high school career.
Yeah, well, I love to just kind of talking and engaging with the players and the coaches and the parents. They use it as motivation. They're looking at your rankings from upstate or in Western New York and in Hudson Valley, and they're saying hey, if I do this, I'll be on track to break that. And it's pushing the kids to become better. And I think it's all positive stuff. It's really it's quality, accurate, at times motivating information for kids to really see. And then for you, what are some things that have evolved in your website that you're just like, hey, I love this, I enjoy it, I want to do more of it? And then also, what are some things that are on the horizon that you plan on doing that might, excite some lacrosse fans across the country?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things is I actually just created player profiles for the first time, and it was November. It was kind of over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday, and I really did that because I would always. It was honestly part of an always dream for me when I started the site. I was like, I wanted each player to kind of have a almost like a college bio like profile on the site that you could go in and you could see like a little encapsulation of what the player's high school career was like, but then also like kind of get an idea of like, career stats and any stories that I'd written on them. But, just technically wise, like I wasn't able to do it until this past year when I found a developer who could kind of help me out with that and fit within the this very small budget I run because, Lax Records, it's a nonprofit. Like I don't make any money off of it. So like whatever money I get off donations and a little bit of Google AdSense is what I have to operate it. So that was kind of the big thing. And that's kind of grown a little bit more than I think I was anticipating because people are now using it as kind of almost to help kids. It's as a recruiting profile because I've added some more stuff since, obviously we're all not playing lacrosse now. So I was like, well, I can make some of the improvements that, again, people had requested, but like, oh, it'd be great if we could do. So my kind of future plans for that and the site is to kind of make those profiles where they are the place where those career records are housed and it feeds into other lists. Part of that is just to help the site performance, make it a little bit faster and snappier for people. And then, I kind of want to do the same for all the coaches because I have a lot of information kind of on the back end and the admin that aren't on the site just because I don't have a way to get it up front. So like I have a lot of year by year win-loss records for coaches and, teams like West Genesee. I have, their entire win-loss record for their entire program, but I don't really have a way to get that on the site right now. So that's kind of where I would like it to go is to kind of be able to basically get everything that I have out to the public. So because I joke because there's some records that I know are probably sitting in somebody's file cabinet somewhere that, they clipped out a newspaper clipping and that's the only place it lives. And I don't really want my computer to be the only place some of this information lives because it's not doing the sport or the community really any good just living on my computer.
It's so true. It's so true. And it's no, it's great to see like bringing to light, the history of the game. And I think it's great also for the current players to have a resource to look back on and see, some of the great players that have played before them, because I think, sometimes without things that they can look at on the screen, they're not going to go digging anywhere else to find that information, unfortunately. But I guess besides maybe, like you just mentioned, like an old newspaper clipping, that's interesting. Like where else might you find, some information that you might be looking for to help, populate the site and, make it more valuable for some of your end users?
Yeah. Literally a couple, I think the record for most overtime, that literally came from a newspaper clipping. Like the Western Albemarle head coach, old head coach had emailed me. He was like, I have this clipping literally in his file cabinet. He sent me the picture, so it had all the information. And I think that was like 14 overtimes. And I had them on my podcast to talk about that game because that was nuts. But I have because I still own a house in Maryland. Like I have the Baltimore Library subscription, so I'm able to access some of the archives and not just the like Maryland papers. Like it has access to like papers in New York. So I've actually combed through a lot of like old newspaper clippings for stuff like that to try and find like a report on some stuff. And a lot of times it takes a lead. Like it is literally a needle in a haystack. Like I don't just go and pick like, oh, I'm going to go to May 5th, 1977 and on Newsday and see if there's anything there. Like a lot of times it's like, someone's like, I remember this happening. I can't remember the date. So it kind of gives me a direction to run in. So anytime someone thinks that, they have a record or someone they know has a record, I always encourage like, give me something, give me a direction to go. And I can usually try and hunt this stuff down in some way, shape or form.
I feel like that hunt is like that can't be easy for you. Is that where, the passion comes out, where it's something you just really enjoy and that's why you're able to maybe discover some of these things that a lot of people maybe wouldn't be able to do on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, for me, like I said, like it's a nonprofit. Like I didn't start this site with dollar signs in my eyes or anything like this. It was literally something I was like, oh, this is because I looked at the landscape of lacrosse. Again, this was 2014, and when I was at ESPN, we were doing Fab 50 team rankings, and we were doing player rankings and stuff like that. And then, when ESPN kind of collapsed, like other people kind of went in and filled that gap that, we were doing at ESPN. Obviously, Inside Lacrosse was already doing it. So I looked around, I was like, all right, what part of covering lacrosse do I enjoy the most? And I was like, other people are doing player rankings and they have more people to do it and are probably better equipped to do it. So like I looked, I was like, I like the records. Like I grew up, playing baseball and playing basketball. And I remember sitting, I'd go to when I was waiting for the bus to pick me up every day, I would go to the end of the driveway and pick up the newspaper, and I would flip to the Agate page and check out, for some reason I was a huge Frank Thomas fan. Like I'd be like, all right, what Frank Thomas bat last night? And I'd figure out his statistics. So like I was always kind of a stat nerd when it came to that stuff. So I think that just kind of it's just kind of funny how everything just kind of comes together. And I'm like, this is the part that I want. And to speak to like just the passion of finding it, like I think part of it comes like that reporter in me and enjoying solving a problem and be like, oh, I think this happened. Like, I kind of enjoy being the person like, oh, let me see if I can figure this out and find it. And then I get a lot of enjoyment just out of being like, I found this. I'm, kind of proud of myself, and two, it's just kind of nice to find something that I think otherwise may have been lost to time.
Sure. And all right, so two things I just wanted to touch on before we kind of came to it. Here you go, sweetheart. Give me a minute. The first thing is kind of just a big part of of Lax Records. Okay, sure. I'll give you 1 minute. Is your podcast, and I find it really interesting. Just some of the guests you have, the stories that you discuss. How do you come about having those conversations? And how do you decide who you kind of bring on in terms of different stories in and around the sport? And then on top of that, based on all the conversations you do have, especially with some of the student athletes that are going through the recruiting process across the country, what's maybe just one piece of recruiting advice you can shed on someone who might tune into our show and be looking to just get any sort of guidance possible to kind of work through their own personal process?
Yeah. Well, as far as the podcast, again, that's something that I do because it started because I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I was like, I kind of enjoy listening to it. And like, honestly, I was having so many conversations with coaches and players before I even started a podcast. I was like, what if I take some of these conversations and actually start to record them? Because again, it was one of those like, I'm finding this useful information. I'm sure there's other people that can find it useful. And it's kind of grown from what I initially started, what I thought it would be. A lot of times, like sometimes players will reach out to me. Like I think Reed Landon, he's going to Duke. He's from Episcopal School in Dallas. Like he reached out to me on Instagram and he was like, hey, I'd really kind of like to share my recruiting story from a kid in Texas. So I look for people who want to do it, and two might have a good story. A lot of times a coach, if a lot of players or a coach, if they're hitting a record and stuff like that, I like to kind of bring them on. But as far as like a recruiting advice, like I've heard such a wide range of stories. I mean, depending on where the kids are from, but it seems like the one thing that I hear from both coaches and players that seems to work out the most is really just kind of perseverance. Like a lot of times I hear like from college coaches that kids will just kind of email out almost like a form letter, like they'll copy and paste and just send it out to a bunch of coaches to express their interest. I think the best metaphor I can find for that is almost like dating. Like if you really want to go to a school, like the college coach wants you to be as interested in them as they are in you. So kind of taking that step, and like the more you can do to kind of make more research you can do on a school to know, like, one, is that actually a place? Like if you want a liberal arts education, you probably don't want to go to a technical school. So if you can kind of express that to a coach, be like, hey, I want to go to you because you have a top 10 engineering program, or and whatever. It's like these are the classes that I want to take. Like that kind of stuff will really help you kind of be in the forefront of a college coach's mind. And and a lot of times, like obviously Brennan O'Neill, like anybody would have taken him this year, no matter what. But a lot of kids aren't that. A lot of times, like if a guy's looking for a midfielder. If you look at like Inside Lacrosse's like top 50, like how much of a difference is between like 35 and 50 is there really? And sometimes that kind of interest in, just kind of showing the coach that you're willing to go the extra mile, like that can be a difference maker in whether or not you're going to play at a school or not.
Sure. Awesome. Well, Mike, we really appreciate your insight and what you're doing. We love your site. We love following it, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck here as you continue to, do great things for the sport and help digitize the history, which is such a cool journey and such a great idea. So thanks so much for your time and thanks for everything you do.
And thank you, Corey. I really appreciate you guys having me on, man. Can't thank you enough.
Absolutely, we'll be in touch. All right, and we'll see everyone next week, same time on Beyond the Game. We appreciate everyone for tuning in.